Today I want to be answering a question that I get asked a lot, and the question is, do Stagg cymbals break? Now the easy answer is yes, they do. All cymbals break. It doesn't matter what brand they are, who makes them, what they're made from, and where they're made. Cymbals can break. So what we should be asking is, why do cymbals break and how can we stop it? Now if you're one of those guys that hasn't broken a cymbal in 30 years, then that's brilliant, and obviously you're not in need of this video. But if you're sitting there and every now and then you crack a cymbal and you're fed up of having to buy new ones, then some of these tips might be of use to you. Okay, the first thing we need to do is have a look at your cymbal stand. Now one thing that gets overlooked a lot is a piece of plastic that goes through the hole that your cymbal mounts to the stand on. Now what I mean by that is, obviously we normally have a washer because otherwise your cymbal would just end up right down on the butt of the stand. But these particular Stagg ones, which are really good, also have the plastic sleeve that covers the part of the stand that the cymbal could come into contact with. Now I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but this is really chewed up. The plastic here wears away because the cymbal is constantly grinding against it. And what you need to think of is the fact that if you didn't have a piece of plastic there over the stand, then that would be your cymbal grinding against a metal stand, and that is one of the causes of your cymbals cracking from the inside out. The next thing we need to look at is how tightly you clamp down the cymbal in the stand with your wing nut or top. At the moment I've got a DH 15-inch XO crash mounted on here. I've got the felt top and bottom, and I've got my cymbal sleeve on. Now once I stick the top on there, I can choose how tightly to screw it down. And something that I see a lot of the time is people clamping it really tightly so that if you hit it, it barely moves, it'll go bump and that's it. Now part of this is due to watching some of the famous guys out there that have them clamped down really tight, especially on things like splashes where you want to play percussive lines on them. They think that's great and they play it and they love it. Unfortunately, what tends to get forgotten is that if you're clamping down your cymbal, it restricts movement, which restricts resonance and vibration, which basically puts too much pressure on the cymbal. It's almost like getting your friend to hold the cymbal and then you hitting it. It puts way too much pressure on there because it's not free to vibrate, and this can lead to cracking over time. So what we need to go for is a point where the cymbal's not going to jump off the stand because you've got a top on it, but it's still completely free to move around. That's going to make your cymbal last a lot longer. The next thing we need to look at is the angle that you're hitting the cymbal. Now this is particularly important and probably the biggest cause of cracking that I've seen. Generally what I mean by this is, if I'm about to go and hit the cymbal, obviously you set your drum kit up so it's comfortable to you, so every setup is going to be different. You're never going to have it set the same as your friend unless you're identical twins. So when I go to hit the cymbal, I need it so that my stick, the shoulder of the stick, is going to just hit the top of the cymbal. Okay, I'm not going to hit it flat on with the edge because that again will put too much force in a bad way on the cymbal and cause it to crack. So I set the angle on the stand so that once I make contact with the cymbal, no matter where it is on the kit, it's always going to be hitting the top of the cymbal. Okay. Unfortunately, in some cases it has become fashionable in the last few years to have your cymbals and drums set at a dead flat angle like that because people think it looks cool. Now that's fine if you've got everything really low down. The problem with it is if I were to go and hit that there, that's not going to be a good angle for my cymbal. I'm going to break my sticks, I'm going to break my cymbals, and I'm probably going to do a bit of damage to my wrist in the long run as well. Once we've got our stand set correctly, once we've got our cymbal mounted correctly, and once we know that there's going to be no damage with any of that part of the cymbal, one thing we need to check is the way we hit the cymbal, and that's going to really help us to not crack our cymbals too quickly. So what I tend to do is, rather than hitting into the cymbal, which is basically directing the stick towards the hole or the centre of the cymbal, I don't quite slice it like some of the old jazz guys, but I do play across the cymbal. So I would aim, rather than to go straight through the centre, I would aim to kind of go across the side. So the cymbal spinning will help me to kind of take some of the pressure off. And basically what that's doing is it's allowing the cymbal to vibrate without my stick being dug into it, restricting it, which again is similar to having your top clamped down too tightly. Now lastly, down to your technique is the way you hold your sticks. Obviously it's all personal preference. You'll see in my videos a lot I tend to switch between matched and traditional grip depending on what I'm playing. But one thing that I'll always try to maintain is a nice loose grip. I use rebound technique a lot. I like the feel of the stick jumping back into my hand. I'm all about getting maximum results for minimum effort. So what I tend to do is have a nice loose grip so that in the fulcrum, which is the pivot point of your stick, there's enough room for the stick to return into my hand. Now the other benefit of that is not clamping down on the stick or not covering that hole and holding too tightly. It allows the kinetic energy to flow right down my hand, into the stick, into the cymbal, and it returns into the stick, which is what causes the rebound. That's what gives the stick the momentum to lift up again, whether it's on a drum or a cymbal. You need a nice loose grip for that. And what that's also allowing to do is a lot of the energy that we put into the cymbal, that can obviously make it break, is then returned back to the stick to give it that rebound. So maintaining a nice loose grip and not choking up on the stick will be a really big help to not breaking cymbals and not breaking sticks as well. Okay, one other thing that we need to have a look at is the type of cymbals you're using. Now, I'm well aware that a lot of people choose Stagg because they're on a budget, and that's brilliant. They're getting fantastic cymbals, a lot cheaper than a lot of other people are getting cymbals for. But you can't let your budget control the size of cymbal you're getting. If you're going to ride on a crash in a groove because you're playing extreme metal, it needs to be a cymbal that is big enough to take that. Simply put, a cymbal cracks once it is already vibrating at maximum capacity and is then struck again. So if I'm going to be crashing or riding on a crash in a groove, I'll use at least an 18-inch crash, sometimes a 19 or maybe even a 20, depending on what I'm playing. If I'm looking for a cymbal and a 15 inch is a lot cheaper than an 18, I'll use it as a secondary crash, maybe one above the hi-hats to use coming out of a groove or back in from a fill, something like that. But I don't use very thin, very small cymbals in place where I would need a large, thicker cymbal. This is a 20-inch Mayura heavy rock crash. Now this is about as thick and heavy a cymbal as you'd ever want to use, so much so that this actually makes an incredibly good ride cymbal. It's fantastic, it's really explosive, really aggressive, a lot of high end, so it's exactly what you want to cut through when you're playing aggressive music. But more importantly, it's a 20-inch, so you can ride on this, and because of the thickness and the size of it, it really takes a hell of a lot to hit it hard enough to make it vibrate at maximum capacity, which means you can sit there and ride on it all day without ever having to worry about cracking it. This is my DH medium thin 15-inch XO crash. It's one of my favourite cymbals. It's really musical, really explosive. It's just fantastic. The thing is, it's very thin. Most Stagg cymbals tend to be a little thinner than some other brands, so the medium thin is, I suppose, more like a thin from another brand. Now their thinness of all the Stagg cymbals help them to give that explosive character that they have. Unfortunately, obviously, if you're buying them on a budget and you go for the thinnest, smallest cymbal to save even more money, they're going to be a lot easier to crack.